the fluorescent lights of Jefferson. Elementary flickered as Marcus Bennett erased the last equation from the whiteboard, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. At 32, he looked older, the kind of tired that comes from working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on in his cramped studio apartment. Teaching 3rd grade paid barely enough to cover rent, and his evening shifts at the grocery store left him running on coffee and determination. But as he gathered his worn textbooks, he heard something that made him pause, the sound of a child crying. Most teachers would have assumed a parent was handling it. Most would have been eager to get home after a long day. But Marcus had never been most teachers. He set down his bag and followed the sound to the playground, where he found a small girl with dark braids sitting alone on a swing, her face buried in her hands, her whole body shaking with sobs. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. "I'm Mr. Bennett. Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her brown eyes red and swollen. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. My daddy forgot me again," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's always forgetting now." Marcus felt his heart crack. He checked his watch. It was nearly 5:30. The school had been empty for over an hour. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Emma Richardson." Marcus didn't recognize the name, which meant she wasn't in his class. He pulled out his phone to call the office for emergency contact information, but the administrative line went straight to voicemail. He tried the principal's cell. Nothing. He was on his own. "Tell you what, Emma," Marcus said, sitting on the swing next to her. "How about we wait together? I bet your dad is on his way right now. Sometimes traffic gets really bad." But Emma shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "He forgets everything since Mommy died. He forgot my birthday last month. He forgot to pick me up twice last week. Mrs. Patterson, the nanny, always has to come get me. But she's sick today." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He knew that kind of grief. The kind that swallows you whole and makes the rest of the world disappear. His own mother had died when he was young, and he'd watched his father struggle to function for years afterward. "I'm really sorry about your mom," Marcus said quietly. "That must be really, really hard." Emma nodded, and for a moment, they just sat there in silence, the evening air growing cooler around them. Then Marcus made a decision. "Come on," he said, standing up. "Let's go inside where it's warmer. We'll keep trying to reach your dad, and I'll wait with you as long as it takes." They went back to his classroom, where Marcus found some crackers in his desk drawer and gave them to Emma along with a juice box he'd been saving for his own dinner. He helped her with homework she'd stuffed in her backpack, making her laugh with silly voices as they read a story about a talking frog. He taught her a card game his mother had taught him, and for a little while, Emma stopped crying. An hour passed, then 2. Marcus had missed his shift at the grocery store. That was $60 he couldn't afford to lose. But every time he looked at Emma's small face, he knew he couldn't leave her. He kept calling the emergency contact number from the school records, leaving message after message. Finally, at 7:30, his phone rang from an unknown number. "Hello? Is this Marcus Bennett?" The voice was deep, strained, and urgent. "This is James Richardson. I believe you have my daughter." "Yes, sir. Emma's here with me. She's safe." There was a sound on the other end that might have been a sob. "I'm so sorry." "I'm on my way. I'm 15 minutes out. I was in a meeting and I lost track of time," and his voice broke. "Thank you for staying with her." "Thank you." When James Richardson burst through the classroom door 14 minutes later, Marcus understood immediately. The man was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months, but his tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild with panic and relief. He dropped to his knees in front of Emma, pulling her into his arms. "Baby girl, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Daddy's so sorry." Emma clung to him, and Marcus quietly started gathering his things, ready to slip away and let them have their moment. But James stood still holding Emma, and turned to Marcus with tears streaming down his face. "You stayed with her," James said. "For 3 hours. You stayed." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," James said firmly. "They wouldn't have. The school secretary called me at 6:30, Finally checked her messages. She said you'd already left for the day according to the sign-out sheet, that you weren't even obligated to be here. But you came back. Marcus didn't mention that he'd never actually left, that he couldn't afford the gas to make 2 trips. She needed someone. That's what matters. James set Emma down gently and studied. Marcus really looked at him, taking in the frayed cuffs of his shirt, the worn shoes, the exhaustion in his eyes. What do you make as a teacher here? He asked suddenly. Marcus blinked, taken aback. That's not really... Please, James said. Humor me. $38,000 a year, Marcus admitted quietly. Before taxes. James was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, pressing it into Marcus's hand. James Richardson, CEO of Richardson Tech Solutions. We're one of the largest educational software companies in the country. I've been drowning since my wife died 6 months ago, drowning in work, using it to avoid the grief, and in the process, I've been failing the only person who matters. He gestured to Emma, who was watching them both with wide eyes. You didn't just watch my daughter for a few hours, James continued, his voice shaking. You gave her something she hasn't had in months, someone who saw she was hurting and cared enough to stay. Someone who made her feel safe when I've been too broken to do my job as a father. Marcus tried to hand back the card. You don't owe me anything. Stop, James said, please. I've spent the last 6 months learning that money can't buy what matters, but it can remove obstacles. I saw your car in the parking lot, saw you eyeing the gas gauge before you came back inside. I know you missed work tonight to stay with Emma. Let me at least cover what you lost. I can't accept... Then let me do something else, James interrupted. Our company has been trying to develop a curriculum advisory board. We need people who actually understand kids, who care about them the way you clearly do. It's consulting work, flexible hours, and it pays well. You'd still teach, but you wouldn't have to work yourself to death doing it. Marcus felt dizzy. Why would you do this? James looked at his daughter, then back at Marcus. Because 6 months ago I lost my wife to cancer. She was a teacher too, 2nd grade. She used to say that teaching wasn't about the curriculum or the test scores. It was about seeing the kids other people overlooked, about staying when it would be easier to leave. His voice broke. You just showed me that people like that still exist. You reminded me of her, and you saved my daughter on a night when I failed her completely. 3 months later, Marcus stood in front of his classroom, but everything had changed. He still taught at Jefferson Elementary. He loved those kids too much to leave, but he longer worked nights at the grocery store. The consulting work with Richardson Tech had given him breathing room he'd never imagined possible. More than that, James had become an unlikely friend, a man learning to balance work and fatherhood, often calling Marcus for advice. And Emma? She visited his classroom sometimes after school, no longer crying on the playground but helping him arrange books or showing him drawings she'd made. James was in therapy now, learning to grieve while staying present for his daughter. He'd scaled back his hours at work and started coaching Emma's soccer team. On this particular afternoon, as Marcus erased the whiteboard, he thought about how a single act of kindness, just staying when he could have left, had changed everything. Not because of the money or the opportunity, but because it had reminded 2 people, drowning in their own pain, that they weren't alone, that someone saw them, that someone cared enough to stay. His phone buzzed with a text from James. Emma wants to know if you're coming to her soccer game Saturday. Fair warning, I'm a terrible coach, but an enthusiastic one. Marcus smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Because that's what you did for people who mattered. You stayed. You showed up. You reminded them that even in their darkest moments, they weren't forgotten. And sometimes, if you were lucky, that simple act of humanity created ripples that changed everything.